Hello and welcome to our watercolor class today. We are just going over how to set up the circles on your paper. I'm using 140-pound watercolor paper, and we're just going to color rings basically. And then we'll take our black ink pen and do some Zen doodle. Mandalas are a great way to relax and do some freestyling sketching with the Zen doodle artwork. I've got a couple of examples we'll show you as we get going. But basically, I'm just explaining how the monks do it. They've got this color that they scrape into powder, and the Buddhist monks make these beautiful mandalas out of the powder ink, and it must be some sort of a stone that they use, natural colors. And what they do once it's done is basically just sort of push it all into the center, and it's like a wish to the world. Very cool. If you want to Google the Buddhist mandala making, is quite a thing to watch. I'm using an old-fashioned compass, and I prefer this way. So I start in the center and just make rings as I go around. If you do not have a compass or you don't have any way to make those circles, what I would suggest is that you get some round bowls, maybe some lids, all different sizes, and start at the outside of your paper. You want to start about half an inch in from the outside edge. Put your largest one on first. There, the show close-up of how many rings I've done, and then every circle that is a little bit closer to the center is going to be smaller, and you're going to be able to gauge how big that circle is by how far away it is from the outer ridge. So I hope that explains it. So you start with the large one and then do the next one, next smaller one, and so on until you get to the center of the mandala. And so I'm just taping my paper down onto a board because I like to have things flat when I'm putting the water on the paper. And I'm going to just go through the colors a little bit. I have an idea to make this look like a sun mandala, so I'm going to be using several different shades of yellow. And what I've done here is just, I've showed this in other videos where I've got samples of my palette on a piece of paper, so I know exactly what colors look like. And the second paper is the Van Gogh paint in the tubes, which I showed you there. And they can also come in the little squares. They're a little bit better quality, and they do have names. And I just use my spray bottle to wake up my paints. I just let them dry from day to day, from session to session. And I make these little strips of watercolor paper, the same as my artwork, and I use it to set up my color scheme. And I use it throughout the painting to make sure that the color that I'm putting on my artwork is exactly what I'm looking for. So the only way to do that is to actually put it on the same kind of paper. I mean, you can do it on a paper towel or a tissue or something. It doesn't always come out looking the same. So I'm just testing out these different yellows that I have in this palette. And I'll just do a ring, every ring a different color, and just to mimic the colors of the sun. Now I'm looking at the color wheel here, and I've gone through this as well, that if you want to do a complementary combination of colors or use 3 or 4 colors, it's perfectly fine. We have a couple of different samples that we'll show you as we go. And yeah, so we'll get started. The template is ready to go. Here's a couple of samples for you. You can see the design is a little bit different from one ring to the next, from one mandala to the next. And so just starting at the center of your mandala, start applying your colors, just following the lines. And what I suggest is that you do one circle and then skip another one, because that will let the circle dry. You don't want to have things blending into the next circle. Unless you want that effect, that's perfectly fine too. but I'm just keeping them all separate. And I am not wetting my paper first. The reason for that is because it's a small amount of area that I want to cover, and I don't necessarily need the color to flow. It's perfectly fine to just work around the circle on dry paper. And what you'll find is probably the most challenging part is to stay between the lines and just keep that tone the same around the circle. But if there's any sort of inconsistencies in the color, it's perfectly fine to go back and fill that in. And just remember that we are going to be using a black pen once this all dries to go over top. So you don't necessarily need a perfectly painted circle. Okay, so there's a little bit of a close-up of what I'm doing there. I'm putting on quite vivid colors, so I don't have to go over it again. It's just however you want your mandala to look. It can be pastel colors, it can be vibrant, just however you want. So just putting on the next circle there, the next ring, a little bit darker. And just picking up, you can see how I use my finger to just pick up just a little bit of paint that perhaps goes over the line. It's best to pay attention to that first. If you do go over the line, it's really easy to just pick it up. So just skipping ahead a little bit, we've got the next circle on. It's not quite as dark as I would like. It's okay to just play with it a little bit and get the shade that you're looking for. And just adding the next circle a little bit lighter. Just all these different shades of yellows and oranges with the beautiful sunshine in mind. Being so close to summer solstice, I thought that this might be kind of fun to make it look like the colors of the sun. And putting on one more layer on the outer ridge. I believe I have one more after this. And it, it doesn't look anything like how I imagine it to look. We'll start with the black pen and some Zen Doodle shortly, and then things will start to take shape. And one last ring around the sun, a little bit lighter, a little more golden. And just remember that it doesn't have to be perfect. If it looks a little blotchy here or there, we're going to be putting that design over top with the Zen Doodle. Now in our classes, I do my best to explain to you how we're going to do it before we get started. And so I'm just sketching out some ideas very roughly. And I suggest that if you're not going to follow a set pattern, that you might want to also sketch out just ideas that you might have. And so I'm just going around the circle, putting some sort of circular hook-like shapes on one circle, and I'm just making the drawing look like the rings that I have. So I've got one circle in the center, that will be the cross, and then is putting little circles in there. Just even a circle with a dot in the center can be what you can do for one row, one ring. And then, just putting in some half circles and then making little hook marks down from the center or from where they match, and just planning things out as I go. So this is what I sometimes like to do is to put hearts in there. The only thing is that you have to map it out so that you end up with two of those at the end. You don't want to end up with just one little half circle. And this is something that, you can make the whole circle as you go. I do show you later how to mark out a quarter of the circle and 1/8 of the circle, so you have guidelines to help you. So now we're going to make some marks within the center and along the outside of the rings. I'm just using a ruler to mark the center. I'm doing this freehand, and I suggest that you make marks for these spirals from the center so that they look centered and balanced. You don't want to have a mandala that looks a little bit off. So mine is a little bit off. It's done freehand, and I suggest that you map it out. And so now I'm just using the next row to put in these little curly cues, and I'm using the lines that I've drawn as guidelines. So these will all your design should spiral from the center of the circle. And I've decided to take it off the board so I can easily move it around. And now I'm just drawing in the hearts that overlap two different rings, bringing those out from the center using my lines as guidelines. And so now I'm just doing a little design within the heart shape. Sometimes easy to just do one step at a time, even though it's within the same shape. Just do one step at a time. And now I am filling in some darker shapes that come out from the center, and it's good to have different tones if you fill it in and make it black, or if you leave it open to the color below. It's good to have a little bit of variety here and there. And now I am outlining one of the rings, and I am just using tiny little marks to go through. I believe these are just tiny little circles connected and following the line between the two colored rings. So I think that helps to define the ring, almost like the hearts are coming from that ring itself. And then I'm going to go around and I'm going to put another little heart between the larger hearts. So just going around and filling in the space between the bigger hearts. And so now what I'm doing here is just sort of making a honeycomb effect with one loop and then another one and another one, just leaving a little bit of space in between each loop. And then you'll see I go back and I fill in every other loop, so it looks like they're a little bit of energy, I guess, to them with black and white rings. So you can see they stand out a little bit. There's a bit of a stripe to them. There's just one loop on top of another. And here I'm taking out my circular measuring tool, and I don't know what this is called, but it has the 90 degrees, 45 degrees for half a circle. So I have to do the top part first. I'm just marking where the different degrees are so that I can sort of bring a little bit more balance to the circle. I've been trying to do it freehand, and sometimes it works out okay. Sometimes we measure it and it still doesn't look exactly balanced, but this is how we're doing it today to sort of bring some balance to it. So now that I have things marked out, what I'm doing here is just bringing in some triangle pieces, and I will continue these triangle pieces throughout that ring. So we're doing the ones across from each other first, and then we'll do the other side, and we'll do another one. And this class basically ended before I was able to get this done, but I was able to map out 4 different corners to sort of give you an idea of how that works. So this one didn't quite get finished, but you can see where I'm going with this. I hope that you enjoyed that. I'm including other patterns for you to try out. Thanks for joining us.